Hey everybody, it's Miss Spees. I have another apple story to share with you. This one is called Johnny Appleseed, My Story. Johnny Appleseed, and the story about him is a fable, which means it's an old story that's been retold a lot of times. And if you actually ask your grandparents, they've probably even heard of the story because it's been around for a long time. So let's find out about Johnny Appleseed since we're learning about apples this week. Here we go. Someone is coming, Beth yelled. It was a lean, wiry man with pep in his step. Mama, Papa, cried Will. It's Johnny. It was Johnny Appleseed. Papa stopped chopping wood. Johnny Appleseed's always welcome, Papa said. He always has a good tale to tell. Johnny smiled and waved hello. Mama invited him in for dinner. Beth and Will were so excited. They jumped up and down. Tell us a story, they begged. Johnny scratched his chin. His eyes were kind. You children are growing like tree sprouts. I will tell you a story after I help your Papa chop some wood. Oh, here's Papa out here working hard. So Johnny was good with an axe. He chopped and chopped and chopped. At dinner, Johnny ate all he could. He told Mama, I walked 20 miles to get here, and your pie was worth every step. Then he winked at Beth and Will. Now it's time for a story. Beth and Will sat on the floor. They loved stories. Johnny's story began like this. My real name is John Chapman. I grew up in a big family. We had 10 kids. We were noisy and raggedy. We were always barefoot. And we were as hungry as bear cubs in the springtime. Always hungry, playing outside. Who else likes to do those things? To be by myself, I would head out into the woods. I knew the trees and the rivers for miles and miles. More and more, the woods felt like my home because I spent so much time there. After school, I worked to help my family. But when I was old enough, I set out on my own. I packed up my gun and my hatchet, and I left Massachusetts walking west on my bare feet because this long, long time ago, he might use his gun if he saw a bear or an animal that he could eat for dinner. To cook it up, he'd have to kill it. Soon I came to a cider mill. They were giving away the seeds from the apples. And so a poor boy never passes up anything free. I filled my pack with seeds, and I grinned as if those seeds were gold. But I lost that grin when I walked into a storm in Pennsylvania. I was walking up the mountains. All at once, the day turned dark as night, and the wind began to howl. Ooh, it was bitter and it was cold. Snow was up to my waist. If I didn't do something soon, I was going to die. It was too cold and too much snow for someone just walking. I made up my mind. No storm was ever going to be the end of me. So I ripped the strips from my coat to wrap up my bare feet. So remember, no snow boots then. He's wrapping up his feet from pieces from his coat. Then I wore snowshoes that I wove from the branches. And I walked right out of that storm. No boots. Imagine how cold your feet would be. But he kept on going. Walking gave me time to think. Folks were moving west. What would they need when they got there? Apples! I would plant an orchard. So I got an axe and I started clearing out the trees. Chunk, chunk, chunk. I chopped and I chopped and I chopped. And I made the wood chips fly. He's chopping them all down. Look at all that hard work. Soon, my first seeds took root and sprouted. So all those seeds he had in his backpack, he planted. So then he set out west to go find more land. And I planted apple seeds in Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Indiana. I sold little sprouts to people that were heading west in their wagons. And I sold sprouts to settlers living in the log cabins. One sprout will cost 6.5 cents. Sometimes I traded sprouts for food or clothes that I needed. Some folks were too poor to trade, so I would give them the sprouts for free so they could still plant a tree. I knew how it felt to be poor because he experienced that when he was little with all his brothers and sisters. Most folks don't know my real name. They just call me Johnny Appleseed. I still work hard because I'm taking care of all my orchards I planted. I sleep out under the stars, and I will never wear any old clothes. I will wear any old clothes or hat to help me keep me warm. So he still is just outside, sleeping, taking care of his plants that he planted, and he sleeps right by the fire to stay warm. Johnny held up his bare feet, and he said, "But I still don't like to wear shoes," he said. "Unless it's winter, I don't need them. My feet are tough." Folks say your feet are as tough as elephant hide. Folks say your feet are as tough as elephant hide, said Beth. "So tough that a rattlesnake can't even bite through," said Will. "So much walking makes his feet really tough." Johnny laughed. "There are more stories about me than fleas on a dog. Folks say that I can leap over icy rivers or melt ice with my bare feet. Folks say I once met a band of men who wanted to fight me. I talked them into a chopping contest instead, saying they wanted to fight him, and he said, 'I don't want to fight. Let's see who can chop the most trees down.' Of course, I won. I tricked those rascals into helping me clear land, and then I could plant the new apple trees." Then there's the bear stories that you hear about me. People say bears trust old Johnny Appleseed. Mama bears do not mind if I wrestle and play with their cubs. Others say I sleep with the bears to help keep me warm on winter nights. Ugh, have you ever smelled a bear's breath? P.U. But one thing is for sure, I know a lot of people that live on the land. Many of them are my friends. They've taught me their languages and how to hunt for food and how to make canoes out of hollow logs. Lots of very good skills if you're living outside. Oh, Will yawned. Beth was already half asleep. Johnny stood up. "Time for you two to go to bed," he said, "and time for me to keep on walking. There's always more planning for me to get done." Beth and Will hugged Johnny. "Next time you visit, will you have more stories to tell us?" Will said. "Yep, and I'll have more wood to chop," said Johnny, "and more of Mama's apple pie to eat." So Papa smiled at Johnny. "You look like a happy man," Papa said. Johnny smiled too. "I am a happy man," he said. "I have spent my life raising apple tree sprouts." So there, even from the other story that we read, is how the flowers change in from the beautiful pink flowers, and then they lose the petals, and then you could only see the sepals that are left. And then over here, we start to see the apple forming. It's only green then, and then it can turn into red. Now, all across the land, folks are enjoying apples from the trees I planted, and that makes me happy. Then Johnny Appleseed waved goodbye. And that is the story of how Johnny Appleseed planted apples everywhere he went.